Welcome to the Fintech Australia Podcast, brought to you in partnership with Tier 1 People, Australia's leading Fintech Executive Search consultants. I'm your host, Dexter Cousins. Well, welcome to a very special show that we've got. Today is the 1st of July, 2020. It's the beginning of a new financial year, and it's also the first day for the open banking, or CDR, here in Australia. And for such a momentous occasion, I'm joined by a very special guest, a good friend from TrueLayer, Marie Steinthaler. Marie, welcome to the show.
Great to be back, Dexter. And what a day.
It is, yes. It feels like it was never going to get here. In fact, I can remember it was about 2 years back when the then Treasurer and now Prime Minister Scott Morrison stood in front of a room of around about 200 fintech people and said, I'm relying on you to make this day happen. And it's finally here. So we've got some exciting and a fantastic lineup to, I guess, celebrate the event. We've got Gareth from Frollo. We've got Stuart Lowe from Bizza. We've got Fred Shabesta from Finder. We've got John Raymond from Identity. But before we get into the show, Marie, love the work that you do with TrueLayer. And I thought it would be a good idea if you could maybe just share with our guests some of the cool stuff that TrueLayer is known for.
Great. TrueLayer is an open banking platform that operates at a global level. So what we do is we go out and find the best banking APIs and integrate them into our platform so that fintech developers can integrate financial functionalities such as open banking data or payments into their application much more seamlessly and innovate faster for consumers at the end of the day. And we do that currently in Europe, and Australia is going to be our first market outside of Europe where we're launching fully later this year. The CDR was a big reason for us to be interested in the market, and I think the fact, you look at the great lineup of guests that we have here today is testament to the fintech economy that's growing in Australia and that we hope to be a part of and contribute to in our own way and bring something to the market, while also having healthy collaboration and competition with local players.
You mentioned just this, that you've been very active in Europe, where UK is probably two and a half years ahead of Australia now. What are some of the, opportunities that you see here in Oz that maybe you've not got in the UK just yet?
We think that one of the big areas where Australia will be fantastic for us to work on is the breadth of the consumer data, right, when compared to open banking in Europe. The regulation that drives open banking in Europe is very much centered in the payments world. So there are actually some restrictions to the level of data that's available when compared to the CDR. So as a concrete example, mortgage data, which is in scope from November this year for the Big Four in Australia, is not actually part of the scope in Europe as of today. That's something that we've been talking very heavily to regulators about under the banner of open finance. And it's great to see that in Australia, we'll have to make that accessible. Otherwise, we won't necessarily be competitive locally. At the same time, in Europe, obviously, we have the payment capability, which is not available in Australia on day one. So hopefully we can kind of cross-seminate between the two regions in a way that's helpful.
Fantastic. Well, our first guest is Gareth Gumbley from Frollo. And they had a bit of a landmark, or as Gareth describes it, landing on the moon moment over the weekend. So we're going to have a little chat with Gareth now. He's going to tell us a little bit more. Gareth, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Dexter. Good to get on today. I'm pleased to be here.
Mate, well, it took a little bit of persuading and hassling on my part, but it's awesome to finally have you on the show. So we're pretty familiar with each other, but for the listeners that aren't aware of Frollo, could you maybe share a little bit more about what you do?
Sure, I'd love to. So Frollo is a purpose-driven fintech. We're really on a quest to help people feel good about money. So to do that, we built a really simple to implement technology that helps businesses, their customers and employees to turn around their finances. And we do that helping them use their own bank data. And so a little bit more about Frollo is that there are two parts to our business. We have a consumer app, and we have over 110,000 consumers on that. And that's where we test and learn with our technology. And then we also work with neobanks, traditional banks, fintechs, lenders, or employers to leverage our B2B SaaS platform or our open banking solutions. So that, really they use white label apps, or they integrate our APIs into their existing mobile apps or their lending processes. And then we help them fast track new solutions to improve people's financial well-being or innovate in a banking experience. So that's a little bit about us.
Great. So it's exciting times for Frollo. We're here talking 2 days out from, I guess, what is the official go live date for CDR. Little bit of a kind of first for you guys over the last couple of days, and one of the reasons why it's been so hard to get hold of you. Would you like to share with our listeners a little bit about what you've recently just achieved?
Sure. So we were the first Australian fintech to become accredited under the CDR at the unrestricted level, which means that we can not only use bank data, but also use utility data and telco data as that becomes available. We, over the last weekend on Saturday, I think at 5:35, we officially provided consent, a consumer provided consent, and we collected bank data from one of the big four banks. So it felt like for us a bit like being the first fintech on the moon.
Yeah.
We were pretty excited, and I think everybody is sitting on the sidelines waiting with bated breath for CDR to really get rolling. So it was nice to see it happen in action,
Absolutely.
and it's phenomenal. So it's incredibly fast. The data is good. So it's pretty exciting for the team to finally get there. We've tested hundreds and hundreds of use cases. We've it's a bit like that Reid Hoffman saying, where you throw an airplane off a cliff and then you build it on the way down. It's really been like that with CDR as we've really worked with the banks and with the ACCC and Data 61 to build the standards, to apply to the rules. And we all had our own interpretations along the way, and we had to work together to navigate that. But I think there's been a tremendous amount of effort that's gone into it to get us where we are now. It's an exciting time.
Yeah, and I guess that kind of analogy of building the plane as you're flying it. The risks if you get it wrong. They're certainly within a fintech perspective, highly regulated environment. It must be very difficult to be able to go with an approach of experimentation whilst you've got all of those boundaries with which you've got to work in.
Yeah, I think it really is, but I think there's a tremendous amount of focus on making sure that what we are setting out to achieve is really protecting consumer data. So the consent process, the ability to remove your consent, initiate your consent, have it for a period of time, that is pretty critical in the process to make sure that we get that right. A lot of time and energy goes into that. The screens that we use in the app, the language we use, took us many iterations to get that right with the ACCC to get consent right. And then the second is then sucking in the data and then having it inside our environment in a safe environment to be able to interpret that and provide insights back to consumers. So there are sort of three steps to this. It's kind of give consent, receive the data, and then the third is now what we're going to do with it. And that's been the most exciting and biggest investment for us, I think, post just getting accredited.
And so from a consumer perspective, when do you think Frollo users are going to be able to see the benefits of CDR and the work that you've been doing?
In 2 days. So we start.
Wow.
So in 2 days we start to open up. So we've got I don't know hundreds or 1,000 or so that are pushed to the top of a wait list that we're creating.
Yeah.
So they'll be the first in the country to
I hope
do
I'm
that.
on there.
I think you are on that. Yeah, for sure, for sure. Maybe I'll bump you up a little bit from this, but that's really the process. So we'll start to roll that out gradually. We've got banks online now. Our employees are testing, so we're all using it and starting to see the benefits of it, and then we'll start to bring the consumers in on the 1st of July.
Great. You used an analogy of the first fintech on the moon. I think I'd use the comparison of when the internet was born. Not very many people knew about it, and it took a number of years before it really had an impact. I kind of get the same feeling that CDR could be following that same path of the internet, where not many people are aware of it, but it's going to have a significant impact on how we all live our lives. What are you seeing as some of the opportunities for Frollo as you kind of go live in the next couple of days? And you got anything new or innovative plan for users?
I think really, we've been working in the space of helping consumers feel good about money for the last 3 years. And prior to open banking or CDR, we were using screen scraping to do that. So a lot of the techniques and the APIs that we created to work with core bank systems as well as screen scraping, we're able to leverage immediately with open banking and that CDR data. So really, that's about helping consumers, sort of on 3 customer journeys. The first is helping them save for something, so helping them identify ways they can save money. The second is to pay down debt, helping them manage their finances to reduce their debt and reduce their stress around their debt. Or the third is really, those of us that just want to track our money or just see where our money goes and track our finances. They're the key kind of journeys that we take consumers on. But the exciting thing is with CDR is that we're able to tie product API data with consumer transaction data. And what that really means for the consumer is that we're able to see how they're using the financial products that they have today and whether it's best suited for them or whether there are better deals out there. And we'll be able to bring that to market within the next few days and start to identify that, showcase that capability.
And where can people find out more about Frollo, Gareth?
Sure. I mean, you can just jump onto our website, frollo.com.au. Yeah, then just jump on the App Store. It's on the Apple App Store and on the Play Store.
So that was Gareth there from Frollo, and he brought up a really, I guess, significant challenge that's faced CDR over this last 2 years, Marie, which was the whole topic of consent. So what have you seen in Europe that Australia can maybe take on board to really kind of push that and take it a bit further?
Great question. I think consent as a topic is obviously close to everyone's heart in the world of open banking. We ultimately are very aligned across the world, across Australia as well as Europe, that being consent-driven and being customer-driven is crucial to making this ecosystem succeed. It's part of what regulators really focus on. The parts that Australia got right or got more right than perhaps in Europe are, for instance, the fact that a consent can be valid for up to a year, whereas in Europe, the equivalent time period is only 90 days. I think that's been a huge, huge problem in Europe, that after 90 days, consents drop and it's a huge re-authentication process for the customer, which is not great. And that's something that Australia managed to avoid by setting it to a year. We've seen the consent journey really working well, especially on mobile, when the customer gets redirected to the banking application to do the usual comfortable biometric authentication that they're used to. In Australia, the equivalent, there's essentially one equivalent method, which is using a one-time password. That's going to be an interesting new user experience for Australians to get used to. The upside of having one determined mandatory way of giving consent and then also authorizing and authenticating is that if it's the same across all banks, then that might improve conversion because that's what customers get used to. But on the flip side, it reduces, I think, some of the benefits of using the mobile technology that exists in native apps. So we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, it's not been easy to figure out. I guess one of the other challenges as well has been the whole exchange of data and becoming a data recipient. We caught up with Stuart Lowe from Bizza, and they've been developing a platform and software to help banks do that. So let's hear from him. And after that, we've got Rob Hale from Regional Australia Bank. Stuart, welcome to the show.
A pleasure to be here, Dexter.
So could you tell the listeners a little bit more about Bizza and what you do?
Sure. So Bizza.io is an open data and open banking technology company, and we were founded in 2017. We're specifically focused on helping participants deliver the consumer data right, and we embrace an open source development model, much like Red Hat, whereby all of our software is available free for download, and on a commercial basis, we offer professional services, production support, and maintenance.
Got you. So how did you get into CDR and open banking?
Sure. So, I mean, I guess it's a little bit of a long story, but I've been in the technology space for about 20 years in multiple sectors. And I started contributing to the CDR in July 2018, sort of way back in the first 10 decision proposals. And I was also the engineering lead within the standards body within Data 61 for a period of time. So I've sort of been at the coalface since the beginning, trying to figure out how to make it all work and tick.
How are you going about tackling, I guess, some of the big opportunities that we keep hearing about in CDR?
Look, fundamentally, Bizza is focused on the picks and shovels required for CDR participants to comply and integrate with the CDR ecosystem. So we have customers on both sides of the data holder and data recipient equation. And, they have a variety of motivations. Part of it would be their compliance obligations on the holder side or the bank side. Some of it's enabling innovation. And then there's also the recipient side, which are developing and delivering new value propositions. So we do all that with we've got a set of tools that are all open source. That means people can pick and choose and take bits and pieces and integrate into their software. So I guess the big problem we're trying to solve is making the technical process of implementing CDR easier. And we have this principle internally that our target should be to reduce the technical friction of entering the CDR to zero. That's a complex and difficult problem, and within the financial services sector, it's not as easy as it sounds. But we think we're doing an all right job. From an opportunities standpoint, I think there's plenty of opportunities out there, and we're really targeting being the people behind the people delivering those opportunities. Some of the opportunities, the easy ones, are product comparison sites can now get a lot deeper comparison or comparative tools as opposed to just a few headline things. And then you can step into things like financial well-being, which can focus on budgeting tools based on your transaction information. But longer term, I would say that you're also going to see the enablement of like cross-industry bundles. Get your banking services and get a free telco deal or internet deal, and also probably new billing methods, much like cloud-based billing methods. So pay per use or consumption-based. Almost an Amazon-style approach to banking, I guess, is probably where I would see it going.
Yeah. So which kind or which types of businesses are you working with right now?
Sure. So primarily our customers right now are actually on the holder side, because obviously the banks have to move first, right?
For those who aren't aware, a holder would be what, a Big Four bank or a financial institution?
Yeah, so an ADI at the moment, authorized deposit taking institution. So the Big Four have, I would say that they've got enough money and resources to do things themselves. Is probably where I would say things are. But certainly the next tier, right? The next guys down. I mean, they're much smaller teams, and usually they prefer to leverage software that's out in the marketplace as opposed to build it themselves. And the CDR itself, there isn't that much off-the-shelf software that you can get for the CDR, and that's sort of the gap that Bizza sees and is definitely filling. So that's how we solve things at the moment for the bank side. And then as a proxy of that, in order to deliver those, we've gone and built essentially a model data recipient, so the fintech side. That means we can now help fintechs integrate into that ecosystem as well. So, our primary customers right now are banks, but we really see ourselves as, I guess, a friend of all the participants in the ecosystem.
In terms of the business, how many people are you?
We're still a small business. We have less than 10 full-time employees. We're all based in Australia, though. We are exclusively Australian, and primarily because we think having that I guess time zone matching and everything works most effectively. Bizza.io itself is it's bootstrapped, 100% bootstrapped. So I've sort of been at this now for, as I said before, a few years, and I'm now happy to say that we're post revenue. So
congrats.
It's been a bit of a slog, but we're there. So we're now post revenue.
I love a good bootstrap story.
Well, it's a challenging pathway to go, that's for sure. And it possibly could have been a little bit easier, but we got there in the end.
Great. So what's next for Bizza.io?
Look, next for Bizza is helping our customers deliver the CDR. We've got a number of customers who are really focused on, I guess, being leaders in this field. They want to be first adopters. They want to get out there as quickly as possible, and we're really focused on helping these, I guess, the visionaries as far as seeing the advantage that the CDR can deliver, as far as helping consumers or give consumers more choice. And so our focus is really helping deliver for those customers and getting a number of happy reference customers, because the whole CDR is customer focused, and just because we're delivering into these organizations rather than directly to customers doesn't mean that we shouldn't also be customer focused. So that's our focus, is keeping them happy.
And what's your big vision for Bizza?
Look, ultimately, I would say our vision is to help deliver more consumer choice. We think that we have the right technology, and that's really key to this mission. And once we have a number of customers helping deliver that choice, there's an opportunity to really disrupt the financial services software sector. That sector is very inflexible. It's usually, they're multi-billion-dollar companies that move very, very slowly. And what ends up happening is that their customers are limited in the choices that they can deliver because of it. And so our big vision is really to disrupt that space, that financial services software space, using CDR as a springboard towards that.
And finally, we've got a little bit of good news this morning that we might be able to share on the show as an exclusive. Anything you can tell our listeners to kind of whet their appetite?
Happy to, announce that we've signed a whole of bank customer for delivery of the CDR, and essentially the CDR is no longer going to be the big four. There'll be at least a fifth bank in. They'll be delivering that by the end of 2020, which is well ahead of timeline. So this ecosystem is happening.
Well, Stuart, it's been fantastic to have you on the show. Really excited to see what you guys are going to produce at the end of the year, and it's exciting times indeed.
Yeah, thanks, Dexter. Appreciate the opportunity.
I'm joined now by Rob Hale. He's Chief Digital Officer for Regional Australia Bank. Rob, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Dexter. Great to be here, mate.
Now, we've just had Stuart Lowe from Bizza with us, and he had some exciting news that he couldn't quite share, but I understand that you've got a little bit of an exclusive to give us.
Yes, well, I do. It is a bit of an exciting news. Under the CDR rules, the Consumer Data Right rules, in return for being an early data recipient, that's also an ADI, we have a reciprocal obligation to publish consumer data as a data holder ahead of the normal bank schedule for the other banks. So they need to publish by July next year, but we need to do that by March next year. So not very long ago, that date was actually November this year. And we looked around and really struggled to find a data holder solution that could be implemented in that timeframe. But we did find one, and it's an absolute cracker. So yes, I'm delighted to give you a Dexter Cousins Tier 1 FinTech Australia podcast scoop and advise officially that we have partnered with Bizza.io. And
fantastic.
Yeah, so we'll be using their open source data holder software to publish Regional Australia Bank consumer data later this year.
And as Stuart mentioned in our chat, you're the fifth bank in Australia to be part of the open banking regime. Not bad going for a little regional bank out there. And forgive me, I forget where you guys are based now, but you're certainly not in the CBD or Metro.
So we're based. Our head office is in Armidale, New South Wales, and we go up to the Queensland border, over to Cobar in the west, down the coast, and into the Hunter. So we've got a fairly big spread, around 45 physical branches. But clearly, we're talking today about our digital capability. But unlike most of the companies you talk with, Dexter, we're a bit old. We've been around for 50 years, so we're a bit wrinkly compared to most of the fintechs you chat to, I guess.
Yeah, and I guess you guys are along with the big four banks. I'm assuming you don't have the kind of budgets they've got as well for open banking. So how have you guys gone about innovating in the space? Because it's a really brave call, if you don't mind me saying. It's something that's so cutting edge and really at the forefront of innovation that you wouldn't expect, as you say, a kind of 50-year-old customer-led bank to be at the forefront of that charge.
Yeah, it's interesting because the thing about working in a customer-owned bank is we don't have equity shareholders. We give a dividend, but we give a social dividend. So there's no tension between what a customer needs and that demand to make profits. So that allows you to choose on the customer side of that ledger every time, and that's the mutual model. So our vision is to help regional Australians live better financial lives. That's literally it. And regional Australian, that's a psychographic. You don't have to live in regional Australia to be a regional Australian.
You mentioned there about being for customers. It was I think just over a year back that you announced the partnership with To as well. So you've really been, as a punching well above your weight, I guess, from an innovation perspective and really trying different things and new and exciting things as well. What are some of the challenges for you, Rob, as Chief Digital Officer, when you are up against the likes of the big four banks who are doing billions and billions in profit? You've got the money to spend. How have you found? And I guess where you're based as well. I would imagine it's not a hotbed for fintech talent. So how have you gone about actually delivering, the open banking regime and really getting some momentum with it, with the limited resources that you've got?
Yeah, it is challenging. You're spot on. Ironically, the COVID situation possibly helped us because we were used to, we were one of the 10 participant data recipients trialing the CDR regime with the ACCC and the Big Four. And so a lot of our meetings and a lot of discussions early on and workshops, we had to attend remotely. And that's challenging. If you're not in the room, if you're not waving your arms around and kind of picking up on all the visual cues, it can be hard. So that was a bit of a leveler for us, actually, when all of a sudden everything's remote, everything's digital. But that, not without its challenges. We're limited budget, but they say necessity is the mother of invention. So it's
Well,
so
that's true, right?
We've got a very small team, but they're absolute rock stars, and we just got into it. We didn't ever stop to worry about whether we'd make it or not. We were crazy enough to think we could, and we just knew that we needed to be there on day one, and we just got on with it. There were a few dark days when the dates were shifting and we were kind of struggling to get traction and momentum, but everyone was doing the same, so we weren't alone in that.
And so, have you got any exciting projects, products, things lined up now that we're live and it's kind of all official? Anything that you've got in the pipeline you can share with us?
Well, our use case is not a secret. We currently have an online lending platform. Another great Aussie fintech, Cloudcase, the provider of that platform, and we've built that out for personal loans, credit cards, home loans. And so our use case for CDR is to plug our personal loan application process into the consumer data right ecosystem. So if someone approaches us who has a relationship with currently with the Big Four, they'll be able to provide consent and we'll access their transaction history and automatically process that transaction data using another fintech called Basic. I'm sure you know Demir from Basic. So they have an affordability assessment product that we connect to with APIs. We actually co-developed that with them 2-3 years ago. So the idea there is it processes all that transaction history really quickly and categorizes it in transport, education, groceries, etc. So the applicant doesn't have to do anything. They don't have to do the heavy lifting. On an application form where you get that crazy question saying how much do you spend on groceries a week, and nobody knows, far too much, but nobody knows what that number is.
Yeah.
So we're doing all that for them. That's the plan. So that's our initial use case with CDR. But I mean, the sky's the limit, and what we can do, we'll get that one over the line first, refine that, prove it, get it rock solid, and then I'm sure we'll turn our attention to other things.
Couple of questions before we wrap up. So I guess first of all, what's got you most excited about CDR and open banking?
What we're trying to do with open banking is build trust. I think this is what we do. This is what mutual banks do. It's in our strategy. It's actually quite an intangible thing, but it's developing trust, building trust. It's so hard to do, so easy to mess up. But we know from our history that if you act in a trustworthy manner, if you help people, you do something for them, give them something that they haven't got, make their lives better in some way. If you do that stuff, if you do it willingly, not for profit, not for any ulterior motive, and you keep doing that, and you do it consistently, then you start to develop that trust. And one of the partners we worked with when we were building our CDR use case out, greater than experience, they helped us with the CX for the CDR application. So I'll probably mangle this, but paraphrasing their CEO, Nathan Kinch, their theory is that organizations that behave in a trustworthy manner will be more likely to receive, the very data that allows them to deliver better services to those customers, which in turn enhances that trust. So it's a kind of positive feedback mechanism. So if you just do the right thing, and there aren't any hidden agendas or hidden motives, good things will happen. And so that's what we're doing. That's what I'm excited about, is allowing consumers to be in control of their data, to access better products and services, and lead better lives through tech.
Right. And where can people go to find out more about the work that you're doing with Regional Australia Bank?
Well, you can jump anytime. You can jump on our website, regionalaustraliabank.com.au. But we're doing a few things that we hope will help other people participate in CDR. We've actually created some open source software to integrate as a data recipient. So I think that in itself is pretty cool. I don't think there'll be too many banks in the world that would be creating and giving software away for free, but we're doing that. So we're going to find somewhere to put that, and all the artifacts that we've developed a lot as part of our participation in CDR, because we figure that's going to help other people short circuit their accreditation, short circuit their participation, and hopefully get this thing up and running faster. So we'll I don't know where we're going to put that, but I'll get in touch with you and let you know.
Yeah, mate, that would be awesome. Yeah, it would be great to share that with the community, and it's really great to hear and see, as you said, that underdog story. And
no, it's great. I've enjoyed the opportunity to talk about it. Can you just indulge me for 1 minute though?
Sure.
On this day of all days, on the 1st of July 2020, the first day of consumer data right in Australia, I'd just like to really publicly congratulate Gareth and the team at Frollo. They got that first production transaction last weekend, and there was a bit of a competition going on there, but they won it, so good on them.
It's like the Russians and the US, who's going to be first on the moon.
But all the fintechs we work with on CDR, 86400, Moneytree, Intuit, Wildcard, all of them, and the major banks, and the ACCC and the Data Standards Body. It's been great. We've really loved it. We've loved working with them. It's been challenging. They've pushed us, and I think we've pushed them too. But it's just demonstrated that people can collaborate in banking. It isn't a solo effort. It's not it should be a collaboration. And if consumers are the beneficiaries of that, then let's bring it on.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, it's been fantastic to have you on the show, Rob. Really, again, best of luck with everything, and let us know when you get a home for your software solution.
Will do. No, thanks for the opportunity, and all the best to you too. Cheers, mate.
So that was Stuart Lowe there and Rob Hale. Rob, very positive there about the level of, I guess, collaboration that's been going on, particularly in this last 12 months, and how CDR seems to have brought everybody together, including the big four banks. What's been your observation of how the major incumbents have played ball in Europe?
So I would echo what Rob has said about collaboration. I think the fact that I was on a webinar the other week where we had someone from HSBC, we had TrueLayer as a platform business, we had a fintech that was very early stage, and we had someone from a challenger bank, and we were all talking and uniting over this common idea of open sharing, open collaboration of data, payment rails, and functionality in the spirit and in the interest of the customer. And we've seen the same in Europe, especially in the UK, which is the capital of fintech, definitely in Europe, if not the world. The number of use cases and companies that are starting to experiment with open banking infrastructure is really quite mind-blowing. And every day we have a new request on our intercom asking about can we use open banking data for this? And often it's something quite interesting. So we had one about carbon offsetting the other week, where they wanted to use open banking data to create a carbon footprint for your spending and to help the very environmentally aware people manage their carbon footprint. So I think overall the collaboration is high. Banks themselves, partly from regulatory pressure and partly from starting to see the value in open banking, are starting to be more proactive in asking for feedback. And, it's taken a few years to get there, but it's definitely fully in flight now. And I expect that in Australia, we'll see a similar development. And if anything, I expect it to happen faster than in the UK.
Brilliant. Well, we've got a bit of a unique guest coming next, which is Fred Shabesta from Finder. If you're not aware, Marie, Finder's a comparison site here in Australia. They recently launched the Finder app, which is essentially a fintech app as well. And I had a really cool chat with Fred about what CDR could look like.
Yeah, Finder's traditionally been, I guess, a bit of a publisher of financial information. And I think where we're kind of going, what we're trying to do is become more of a product and technology company. We obviously there's 3 million Australians a month go to Finder to compare things. It's 10 million worldwide. It's obviously got a few people looking at it, and they're comparing and they're saving money, which is a good business. And I think where we're at now is we just launched the Finder app, which helps people aggregate their accounts and it gives people a free credit score and tells them the chance of getting approved for a loan. And we're really delving down this path of starting to become more of a fintech. And I think we have some pretty keen insights, mainly because we've been using a lot of products. We write about a lot of products. We know what sort of people ask about and what features they're interested in. And I guess it's a transition, right, of moving more towards technology. And our UK business is very exposed to a lot of the new technologies, and they've been trialing and testing out new technologies in their market. And now we're really looking to expand that around the world.
The UK is probably 2 years ahead of where Australia is right now on open banking, Fred. What trends and insights have you seen from the UK business that you think you can bring across here into Australia as we go live with CDR on the 1st of July?
Yeah, you're right. The UK is definitely ahead in terms of open banking, but I think they've always been a bit more ahead in terms of some of the new business models, particularly around new banks. And I think Australia is definitely following, and it's starting to happen, just nowhere near in the same volume and size and ambition. It's still a good thing. It's a great opportunity here because there's so much, it hasn't been done. We've been fascinated by, changes in credit scores, and Australia is becoming a positive credit reporting environment. So that's a big change that's happening. You've got open banking coming out in 6 days, which is again very, I think, a big change. I think the relaxing of banking licenses, I think that's really changed a lot of things in Australia as well. So I think it's a combination of things, and it's an interesting blend of laws and the industry changing, and then the customer demand also changing, and then the players that are going to sort of enter those spaces and which angles they sort of come from.
A lot of the use cases that I hear about CDR seem to revolve around something that I guess Finder's been doing for a number of years, Fred, which is your comparison site, finding better deals for customers and consumers. What do you see as the opportunities kind of moving forward for a business like Finder with the CDR and open banking? And what kind of ideas have you got around innovation, around new products and that customers could benefit from?
I think the opportunities is going to be a Cambrian explosion of products for customers to use. I think what's important to give context on, yes, I think the banks have been very, in Australia at least, have been quite open and they've been comparing and doing these things for quite some time. It's actually where CDR goes in Australia that's interesting. You know, it's going next to energy. One of our directors sits on the energy board that's bringing open energy to Australia, and there's telco, and then I think insurance after that. You know, I think some of those other industries, particularly insurance, has not been very favorable towards comparison and sort of has made it quite difficult to compare policies in Australia. And that's a really great opportunity for the customer to save a lot of money and find better deals. I agree to a large extent if you were to look relative to the other organizations that exist, and particularly because there's a pretty strong oligopoly in Australia around insurance. It's just two major insurers and they have 80% of the market and they do a great job of defending that. I would agree to a large degree about the position of where it's at. I do think what these technologies, what they'll do as well is enable a lot more smoothing. So it's quite bumpy. It's, you know, the convenience factor, the user experience is still pretty rough. It's non-existent to a large degree. And now I think, you know, is when potentially things can change.
You mentioned insurance there, Fred. They sit on a heap of data, and yet when it comes to renewal time, it never seems like that data is used to actually build or give a better deal to their customers. Finder sits on a heap of data, as you mentioned. What do you see as the opportunities for businesses like Finder to really use customer data to build new innovative products rather than just digitizing kind of older products and making them a bit more kind of faster, convenient, and quicker to serve?
So what you're talking about there is there's two sides to that, right? So the first one is where I think these insurance companies and banks have been using the data to curate what is a profitable customer for them. And then there's the other side of it, which the customer wants to know, well, based on my data and who I am, where can I get a better deal? Where will I be, rewarded? And each company has, fairly similar models, but also some quite unique and different ones depending on your circumstance and situations. And what I think this will start to do is you'll get that information up front. So just a small example, we built a function that enables our customers to go on and see the chance of being approved for a loan before they apply. And it doesn't affect their credit score. So which ones you're going to get, rejected for, or which ones you're going to get approved for, and then obviously affects your credit score because you don't get dinged and you don't, there's all sorts of follow-on effects of being rejected, right? And that's a small example, right? And that's just the beginning of where we think we can start to take things. Imagine a world where you knew which insurer is going to charge you less because you've given them enough information about their data points that they look at, and they're the kind of customers that they think they want to go for, and you get a better deal than is advertised or anywhere else because they have more information. I think that's a very interesting world. I think there's other opportunities. I think with, I guess, just the everyday convenience of the service in terms of, imagine if you could just slide a little configurator or something, or some sort of button on your phone, and it goes from I want to turn on auto switching. I just want to auto switch my insurance, and I want to get a better deal every 12 months, and go and do that for me. And you've got my information, you've got my details and data, and now the pipes are being created, and I think that will actually create a place where the consumer is empowered to make great decisions based on their personal information, and they're not having to get a spreadsheet out and go through all these bits of data, and instead they can just feed that data in and get some really good advice.
We had Razer, the gaming company, on a few weeks back, Fred. They're going for a digital banking license in Singapore. Do you ever see a day when Finder might become a bank and go for a digital banking license?
I don't think we'd ever become a digital bank, no. I think there's a lot of regulatory aspects to that don't really they don't really appeal to us as much. You can potentially become as close to being a bank without actually being a bank these days. I think some of the things, unfortunately, that the banks that offer are going to become commoditized. I think like bank accounts and things like that. I have an utmost incredible admiration and respect for banks. And the reason for that is, they were the tech entrepreneurs, of the last 25 years, right? They took us from pieces of paper and little books that we took into branches and checks, which were pieces of paper, and digitized that whole thing. And, where you can transfer money overseas and you can borrow money and you can, do all sorts of things and do it in a safe way. You're protected. Those digitizations, I think we take for granted to some extent, but actually they actually were revolutions in and of themselves. As an organization, they've had to, they've done really well, but also they have a systemic connection to the economy and the health of a country. And so a lot of the regulation and pressure comes from that side of things, which again, I guess puts a burden that I don't think we would be best served at doing. We're just not built for those things. Well, we launched the Finder app in Australia in March, so right in the middle of COVID, which has been pretty intense. And a lot of people are using it, but we'd always love to get feedback on how we can improve it. And from a fintech perspective, we're relatively new kid on the block in terms of how we do things, and that's new for us. And we're trying to, in the most humble but excited way, would love to receive any feedback we can in using it.
And where do people need to go to download the app and find out more about Finder, Fred?
You can just go into the App Store and type in Finder, or I think finder.com.au/app.
Fred talked there about this really being an opportunity to reinvent and create products that are really innovative that customers really haven't had access to before. What are your thoughts on that?
Totally agree with Fred that that's one of the areas that we'll see a lot of benefit and better experiences for consumers. If you think about the data that we're going to be able to get access to in a consent-driven, user-friendly way, I think there's a whole host of definitely fintech players who'll use that data in innovative ways. So whether that's a comparison site or it's a lender trying to use it for more accurate income detection, or it's a neobank using it for aggregation and slowly migrating the customer relationship into their world. Those are kind of the table stakes plays that I think we're getting very comfortable and familiar with in Europe. Beyond that, once you take CDR a step further, and we'll see what Scott Farrell's future directions inquiry comes to in terms of recommendations. Once you combine access to the data with the ability to actually initiate actions on the customer's account on their behalf, that's when you see some really interesting opportunities. So you could imagine a service that uses a right access account details update API to update all your addresses with all your providers if you move home, for instance. That's like a feature rather than a business in its own right. But you can imagine there's a whole host of companies that might want to provide that sort of service, and they're not necessarily a bank. Likewise, I think you'll see more and more non-financial services businesses looking at their customer relationships and the trust they've built and saying, you know what, we can maybe actually start providing a financial service of sorts. So if I'm a marketplace or an Uber or a delivery service or an e-commerce player with a lot of trust and customer engagement, what's to say that I can't become a data recipient and start using that data to, give my customers loyalty rewards or better predict when they might want to, buy something that's useful for them in their life because I know their spending patterns. So that's like a scope of what you might see in the future. Obviously, the nice thing that I think framework like the CDR allows is that because it's built not around a specific use case, it opens up a platform for innovation. And if you start with use cases in mind, you might get to the result faster, but you also potentially limit the scope for a crazy innovator to come along and say, hey, here's a really unseen novel opportunity. Whereas with the CDR, it's really anyone who applies and can satisfy the requirements of the regulators can get access. And if you build a useful product, you'll get customers.
Absolutely. Well, I guess, look, the final kind of piece of the puzzle that we've got in today's show is really the topic around digital ID. And I caught up with John Raymond, he's CEO of Identity. They've built a solution which is really, I guess, on behalf of the banks to help them tackle what's been a massive issue here in Australia, where around compliance and digital identity and KYC and fraud, particularly around payments. So let's have a chat to John. John, thanks for joining us.
Dexter, hi. Thanks for having me.
Good to have you on. Now, could you tell us a little bit more about Identity?
Sure. Identity is a young Australian fintech business with big dreams. We're headquartered in Woolloomooloo in Sydney, and we have customers and staff in Australia, Hong Kong, and some prospects in wider Asia and in Europe and the United Kingdom.
Great. And what is it that Identity do?
Identity solves the problem that the information required to process and report financial transactions is often inaccurate, incomplete, and in some cases even missing, which has a significant impact on society. It causes payments to be held up, which means money doesn't get to where it's needed fast enough to keep commerce moving. It causes more and more regulatory fines, which is a cost that's ultimately paid for by consumers. And we've seen that here in Australia recently with Commonwealth Bank and now Westpac. And in extreme cases, it helps facilitate financial crime.
You recently joined Identity as CEO, and it's an exciting time for the business. John, what was it that attracted you to getting on board?
Yeah, look, I was initially introduced to our co-founder, Nick Armstrong, by a personal friend. So it's always nice to have a warm introduction to someone. And I took a look at the Identity collateral and some of the things that Nick sent me to guide our early conversations, and was really interested by the problem that it was solving and the way it told its story in the market. And I have some good connections in the banking space around the world from my previous career, and I had shown the Identity collateral to a couple of friends that are in some senior jobs in banking around the world, and all of them were fairly optimistic about the opportunity and about what the business is trying to do. So a warm introduction, an interest in the problem that they're solving, and externally validated support of what the business is trying to do.
The business is, I guess, at that kind of evolutionary point of any young business where you start to kind of enter that maturity phase. What's the next 12 months hold for you guys?
Look, the next 12 months for Identity is pretty simple, actually. The job that we're focusing on is closing out there are a handful of deals that are immediately in front of us to validate the use cases that we're solving for and to prove that we can solve those problems for financial institutions around the world. So we're heavily focused on, as I said, closing out 3 or 4 new deals that are right in front of us at the moment.
Great. Open banking goes live on July 1st. Are you seeing any opportunities for Identity from the open banking regime as well?
Yeah, I think so. Open banking is really another way of saying that there is an increasing demand both from regulators and customers around the world to see more transaction level information. and the open banking framework is designed to allow individuals to take control of their data, and, for example, to use that with other financial institutions to help them get loans without being penalised for doing it. And the demand for an increased control of and oversight of data is only going to increase as time continues.
What are you seeing as international opportunities, John?
Yeah, that's a good question. We, as I said to you, the problem that we're solving for is that the information required to process and report financial transactions is inaccurate, incomplete, and in some cases even missing. And that's a problem that is felt by institutions all around the world. And it's because their technology is decades old, and more often than not, it's a collection of hundreds of individual systems that don't communicate with each other and certainly don't make it easy, if not outright impossible, for the institution to get a single view of their transaction level information. And it's not a problem that's only faced by financial institutions in Australia. It's a global problem. And I think even in the last 3 months, the COVID-19 crisis has proved to identity, and I would suggest probably every business in the world, or most businesses in the world, that we can work remotely and we can solve problems remotely. So I think that the marketplace for us has suddenly become very big.
It's been interesting to watch the kind of the journey of the business. You've kind of evolved as the technology's evolved as a business as well. What do you see as the kind of next evolution in terms of technology, and is that an area in which you're heading in?
Yeah, look, from a technology perspective, again, back to the problem that we're solving, we're sort of solving the problem that that there's not a rich level of transaction level data or information that goes with transactions. So we've created a platform called Overlay Plus, which, as the name suggests, sits across the top of a bank's entire technology infrastructure, consolidating data from front office, middle office, and back office systems and giving them one single source of truth across all of their transactions. So the future for us, sort of, the next 12 to 24 months and then beyond, is to try and find, or is to focus on a couple of important use cases where we see this where we see this technology making a big impact to the financial services industry. The first one is to help create and complete an auditable AUSTRAC reporting framework for financial institutions to help them get better at their regulatory reporting obligations. The second one is to help financial institutions reduce settlement risk in foreign exchange transactions. And then the slightly longer term play for us and a big opportunity for us is to help banks become ISO 20022 compliant and help them with their adoption plans right across the global banking system.
And how are you finding the banks at the moment? It's obviously a tough time for them. Are you finding that they're receptive to this type of solution, as we come out of the kind of washed out from the Royal Commission as well?
Yeah, look, that's an interesting question. I guess the best way to answer this is through the lens of COVID-19 and the Royal Commission here in Australia. But the demand from government regulators and both corporate and consumer customers to see more rich transaction level information is only going to increase, as I said, despite the COVID-19 crisis. And this is driving an increasing amount of focus and investment in the space. And I think we're seeing, certainly from our own business development pipeline, we're seeing a number of financial institutions who we've been in long tail conversations with, where they are perennially considering the sort of build versus buy conundrum, are coming out and saying, COVID-19 has caused us to reallocate resources. We have still the same requirements put on us by government regulators and customers to see more rich data at a transaction level. And we will probably now start to consider buying solutions to the problem as opposed to building solutions to enable a faster and more nimble solution to be found.
And so you're finding they're more open to collaborating with fintech like yourself?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, as I said before, particularly over the last 3 months, we're seeing financial institutions having to reallocate resources elsewhere. But the problems that they're reallocating resources away from aren't going away. They still have to be solved. And I think, this really opens the door for the fintech industry in Australia and globally to partner with financial institutions who I think, or I certainly get the sense that, are becoming more accepting of fintechs and again, a faster and more nimble solution to their problems.
Brilliant. Well, John, we wish you and everybody at Identity all the best navigating through 2020. And please come back on and let us know how things are going.
Great, Dexter. Thanks very much for having me. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Well, thanks to John Raymond from Identity. That pretty much wraps up the show. But before we do wrap up, Marie, thanks for being on the show, particularly on such a momentous day and occasion. Before we finish up, what's been happening in the world of TrueLayer?
Thanks for having me, first of all, and congratulations to everyone in the ecosystem for getting this huge achievement over the first line, getting it to the starting line, I would say. It's like the race is about to start.
Doesn't feel that way.
I know, it feels like, oh, now you can sit back and relax. Well, actually, it's like we've pushed the car to the starting line, and now we have to start delivering value. So in the world of TrueLayer, obviously right now our product is very mature in Europe. So we have a number of exciting clients that we work with there and are increasingly expanding with across the territory. So we just launched in Ireland with Revolut and a company called Olivia AI a few days ago, I forget. Recently, we have some really interesting partnerships on the payment side. So this is something that I didn't go into depth in today because it's about CDR, which right now is read access, but we're working with the government in the UK to make faster payments, payment initiation, a very accessible thing for government entities to use to accept payments. And then on my end, and for this relevant for this podcast for Australia, we're obviously, we haven't been shy about announcing that we're coming to the market and we are going to contribute and offer our services. So it's really getting everything in gear to launch later on this year and finding and working with partners to do that. And I think a key shout out here on the intermediaries consultation, which I don't know if you can put this in the show notes or somewhere, but if you have any listeners, if you are a listener who is interested in access to the CDR ecosystem, there's a really important consultation out since I think it was last Monday on some new rules for how intermediaries can participate in the system. And I think that's something that will be really key to the growth of the ecosystem. And that's something we can, point to in Europe where there's some really interesting and useful models in place for our clients to be able to access the infrastructure. And we hope that something similar will work in Australia. So that's open until the 20th of July. So for now, let's celebrate the launch and then get our pens and papers out and write some useful responses so that the ACCC can keep doing the good work they've been doing.
Yeah, one day we'll reach a day where no more submissions are required.
Oh, yes, please. I don't think we'll ever get there, but maybe. You're very optimistic, Dexter.
Yeah, well, I've always been optimistic.
Yeah.
It's one of my downfalls. Well, Marie, it's been fantastic to have you on the show. Thank you so much for coming back. And we wish our best to everybody at TrueLayer.
Thank you. Thanks, Dexter.
That's the end of the show, folks. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks to our partners, FinTech Australia. Remember to subscribe if you're listening on Spotify or iTunes, and you can check out the show notes for additional information on how to join the talent market. Until the next time, keep safe.